Hi, welcome to the channel. I'm Ali M. I like to talk about financial survival, and today we are talking inflation. If you like this video, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe. So, inflation. Inflation is super important to understand. It affects every aspect of your financial life and quality of life. And I like to think of it as froth on a beer. The government is the barman, the beer coming out of the tap is currency, the beer that actually winds up in your pint glass is your purchasing power, and the froth, that's inflation. Too much froth is bad, right? We've all been there. It tastes like death. Same goes with inflation. It tastes like death. And a lot of us, myself included, have never lived in an inflationary economy, but it ain't pretty. And instead of purchasing power, delicious, beery goodness, you get nothing, which is inflation. But before we get into what happened in 2020 that's going to leave us all with froth and very little purchasing power, let's define inflation. So people often say it's a rise in the price of goods and services, and that's kind of true, but it's just so misleading because often the goods and services haven't changed. A haircut is still a haircut, an apple is still an apple, my 1 ounce gold coin is still a 1 ounce gold coin. The value, the size, the quality hasn't changed, and the price shouldn't really change. So what gives? Well, instead of focusing on what's going on with the price of a particular good or service or bunches of goods and services, it could be 100 things, shift your focus towards what's happening with your currency. These are two completely separate things. Inflation for me, just my opinion, people will disagree, it happens when a government, or more specifically their treasury, prints way too much currency too quickly, just like that bozo barman who's given me a pint of froth, which makes the currency crappier and less valuable. The crappier the currency, the more you need to buy the same product or service. And the scary thing is, the year 2020 has been a currency printing bonanza. 2020 saw some governments paying like half their population to not work for an entire year, and that ain't cheap. For anyone who has any economic training, 2020 should be ringing serious alarm bells. When you begin an economics degree, you walk into that lecture theatre, and the first slide that's up on the screen, the very first thing you're taught is this: there are no free lunches. Money has to come from somewhere, and this is reinforced throughout the years. So, where did all that beautiful 2020 spending come from? Well, governments got their central banks to issue a bazillion bonds, which is just a slip of paper or an email from the government saying, I owe you some money. It's just a debt note. And the government promises to repay that debt note with interest, which is why bonds are attractive to investors. And these investors are banks, pension funds, international investors, even private individuals. Now, bonds are even more poorly understood than inflation. For those of you who have watched Gone with the Wind, remember that scene where Scarlett is talking with her dad after the war, and she's like, "What are all these slips of paper, Papa?" And he's like, "Bonds. They're all we saved, all we have left. Bonds." And she's like, "Well, that's us officially done for. I'm going outside to forage." Be careful with bonds. So to sum up, the government has borrowed heaps of money from investors to pay for the 2020 stimulus stuff. Heaps. And we all know that in places like Europe and the UK and the States, there's going to be like zero tax revenue for years because no one is working and every industry has collapsed. So how are governments going to repay the interest on those bonds? Well, they're going to print the money. They're going to pour that beer like it's never been poured before. And that's the magic of being a government. They call the treasury and they say, "Hey dude, send $1 trillion over. Cheers." And the treasury prints it. Of course, treasuries don't actually print money anymore. That is so last century. It's all electronic. It's some person sitting in front of a laptop who logs onto the system and puts in an extra 0 or 2 or 3 or 4, and that creates extra currency. So what's the problem, LEM? They got this. Well, my answer? What about inflation? Your currency gets crappier the more there is, and there's a whole lot more of it around at the moment. I mean, sure, people aren't actually spending it right now. Take a look at this chart. It shows how much currency is moving around, and as you can see, it's not. Currency is not moving. People are getting their stimulus checks and they are either buying stocks or buying gold and silver or putting it into a savings account, whatever. And this makes me smile because I know that the government is so peed off about this. They've just poured all this beautiful froth for us out of the goodness of their own hearts, and the damn public is hoarding it. I mean, look at this chart. Like, people are hoarding dollars more than they're hoarding toilet paper. But don't you worry, the government will find a way to force you to spend it. Don't you worry. And when they do, inflation is going to blow up. And what are you left with? Say it with me. A frothy pint. So here are some tough questions. What are you going to do if all your expenses go up by 50% next year? What are you going to do if all your expenses double next year? I mean all of it. Your grocery bill, your rent, your train fare, everything. Put it another way, if today your salary was halved, could you survive? Now what about if prices triple next year or quadruple? And if your answer is, it's cool, my salary will go up with inflation. I like your optimism, man, I do, but you're going to be lucky to have a job in 2021 and beyond, let alone a pay increase. Now, if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable with these questions, I am with you. I am not the top 1%. Oh my gosh, like far from. I'm not a financial advisor as well. I know nothing, but the smarticle particles of the financial world are suggesting a couple of things to protect us against inflation, which I think are a good idea, and I'm personally doing. So firstly, I'm buying gold, silver and Bitcoin. You can't press a button and produce more gold and silver. You have to mine it. Be careful though, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Governments have tried to confiscate gold in the past. I'm looking at you, Australia. And with cryptocurrencies, an EMP hits and everyone's finances are wiped out. But I like gold, silver and crypto. For me, it's like instead of ordering a beer at the bar, which I know will be froth, I order a cocktail, and I prefer cocktails anyway. And secondly, whatever expenses I can fix now, I'm fixing. This can be a bunch of stuff, like locking in a super low interest rate on a mortgage. I'm talking like long term, like 30 years. Or if you're renting, you could look into locking in a price for a long-term rental agreement. You could look into locking in your gas and water and electricity bills. Unfortunately, I can't do this with groceries, but I would if I could. Thirdly, I'm buying stuff that I will need now in case prices explode. I needed a new pair of trainers. I bought a pair second-hand off Spock for £8. Was very happy with that buy. I needed new curtains. I bought some second-hand, but I'm only buying the stuff I absolutely, totally need, and mostly second-hand, which is the next point. Minimize your expenses. I'm talking next level anti-hoarder, anti-consumerist stuff here. I'm doing this. Husband thinks I've officially lost the plot, but I don't care. If I can't eat it, I'm not spending money on it. And that includes drinks. It's tap water for me, and it has been since March. Now, lastly, this is not going to be for everybody, but have a plan to leave the country if things get really bad. Okie dokie, that's all for me today. I hope you liked my take on inflation. If you did, please give a little like for me and please subscribe to my channel. Just below there, below the video, cast your eyes down. There's a red button that says subscribe. Thank you very, very much for watching. Keep your chin up and I'll be seeing you soon.